Let's now take a look at the international newspapers with Elena. Hello again, Elena. Now, what are the papers making of the situation in the UK, where you've got David Cameron vetoing any changes to EU treaties, but you've got his deputy Nick Clegg saying that he's pretty disappointed by this and it's bad for Britain?
It's a bit of a mess, isn't it? Coalition in crisis as Lib Dems hit back. That's the front page over at The Independent. They're, of course, talking about Nick Clegg, who said Britain would become an irrelevance internationally and that he was very disappointed in Cameron's decision yesterday. Now, the paper says this might just be the last straw for Nick Clegg's party, the Liberal Democrats. Of course, they've always been known in British politics for being very pro-Europe. It's probably that more than anything that made them stand out from other parties. And The Independent has always been a paper that backed them. So what they have to say is quite interesting, and they say in their editorial that this is the last straw. The Liberal Democrats have already been forced to back too many policies since they went into coalition which go into conflict with their own principles, and now they say in their editorial the experiment in pluralism has run its course. They say they originally backed the formation of the coalition, but this has just gone too far. No one who voted Lib Dem can back this, they say, and it's time for them to walk away from that coalition. A point quite nicely made by their cartoon, which has a leaf with Nick Clegg's face on it, kind of blowing away from where it was protecting David Cameron's modesty. And you've got the Prime Minister there on his own,
with his trousers down. Now, a lot of people in Britain are supportive of this, though, aren't they? They're going to be pretty happy about David Cameron's move.
Well, that's what the Times says. Voters back veto as coalition is put to the test is their front page, and they've got this big 57% on it. That's how many people, according to a Times poll, say that they backed Cameron's stance on Europe. And in fact, inside that paper, they say this is going to be a good moment for the Tory Eurosceptics. They've really got their wind in their sails. They think the Liberal Democrats might be unhappy, but they might even reckon that they could take the Liberal Democrats pulling out of the coalition and having to have a new general election in their sails. They reckon that this Euroscepticism plays well with the public and that it could even lead them to winning a general election with a Conservative majority, which would of course pursue an even more Eurosceptic policy than Cameron is now.
Now, another big story on the front pages is that deal reached in Durban, that climate change deal. Do they think that anything really significant was achieved at that summit?
Well, look at this Guardian front page. Down under Cameron and Clegg, we've got this global climate deal in sight after Durban breakthrough. So quite a positive headline there. They say there is something we should be applauding coming out of these talks, which is that developing countries for the first time have agreed to cut their emissions. But the Guardian's environment editor on his own blog says that this is a guarantee that our children will be worse off than we are, saying that basically we've just kicked the can down the road, meaning that any definite change, any legally binding change, has been put off until at least 2020, which is just too late. By that time, the planet will have warmed to an unacceptable degree. There's also an interesting piece in the New York Times saying that we were stupid to expect anything of these climate change talks anyway. They say that if we're going to do anything to stop the world from heating up, then it will be small-scale local change that does it, technological change, changes in the way we live our lives, but we can't really expect anything to come out of a big international summit that will change anything.
What about those massive protests in Russia over the weekend? What are the papers making of those?
Let's look at the English language paper, the Moscow Times. Their headline this morning is "Protests are called amazing, but what next?" Now, they say the Kremlin, these might have been very big protests, but the Kremlin probably reckons they can take it in their sails and ignore them, at least until this kind of amorphous mob of demonstrators manages to change itself into a coherent political movement. They do say, though, the Kremlin does seem to have been a little bit caught on the back foot now. You can see that in their cartoon where they've got Putin hiding in a ballot box while crowds of protesters are outside of the window. And they say in their editorial that there's lots of things the Kremlin could have done to placate these demonstrators, like calling for fresh elections, but the fact that they haven't done that kind of shows that they still haven't quite understood what Russian voters are feeling.
And very briefly, we've got Palestinians furious with a US presidential hopeful.
Yes, Newt Gingrich says that they don't exist or that they're an invented people, he said at the weekend in the Republican debate in Iowa. Now, the Daily Beast reports this has turned into a major diplomatic incident because there's so much anger about it in the Palestinian territories.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. But they say how this plays with the Republican base will determine what they really want. If Gingrich's poll figures fall after this, then according to the Daily Beast, at least we'll know that Republican voters are on the same planet as the rest of us. But if he still continues going up, then we'll know that they're not.
OK, thanks very much, Elena, for that look at the international newspapers.